Welcome to the Aussie Wire News. I'm your host, Topher Field, and here at the Aussie Wire, we are your connection to the truth. Thank you for the incredibly positive feedback you've given on our very first episode, which we released on Tuesday. To watch that episode of the news or read our blogs, go to theaussiewire.com. There's never been a more important time for alternative media than right now. And it's a privilege to have launched the Aussie Wire right at this crucial moment in Australian history, but also at a time of great change and upheaval in the media landscape. We've endured over the last few years a period of unprecedented censorship, made possible by the very same technology that allows me to connect with you today. The internet makes it possible for us to communicate and collaborate in ways that were unthinkable not so long ago. But it also gives those in power the opportunity to monitor, censor, and control in ways that were also unthinkable not so long ago. In the words of the former New Zealand Prime Minister,
I cannot go around and individually dismiss every single rumour I see on social media, as tempted as I might be. So instead I want to send a clear message to the New Zealand public. We will share with you the most up-to-date information daily. You can trust us as a source of that information. You can also trust the Director General of Health and the Ministry of Health.
Well, that worked out well, didn't it? How many times in just the last few years have our governments been the ones spreading the misinformation? The fact-checker should have shut down every government social media account years ago on account of the dangerous misinformation they've been propagating. I made a video many years ago titled The Forbidden History of Unpopular People, all about freedom of speech and how we must allow it, even for the crazies.
Now, the concept of free speech has a long and troubled history, so let's get a bit of historical perspective. Ignaz Semmelweis, or Iggy as his mates called him, joined the Unpopular People Hall of Fame by challenging the medical wisdom of his day. Iggy believed that new mothers were dying of disease caused by doctors who were cutting up dead people in autopsies and then delivering babies without washing their hands in between. The good doctor Ignaz Semmelweis slashed the mortality rate in his ward by forcing doctors to wash their hands with chlorinated lime. So, did the medical establishment embrace his life-saving ideas? Keep dreaming. See, it was the mid-1800s and germs hadn't been invented yet, or discovered, or whatever. And so Iggy couldn't explain why his theory worked. He just knew that it did. Things didn't go well. Iggy soon found himself on the fringe of modern medicine, and his career went, badly. He ended up working for free at a small hospital in Budapest where he once again slashed the mortality rate. Do you think the others paid attention then? Ha! Of course not. You see, the medical establishment knew that sickness was caused by imbalances in the four humours of the body, which was often treated with a good old-fashioned bloodletting. Feeling better yet?
No.
The end result? Iggy finally died in an insane asylum after trying desperately and unsuccessfully to get doctors to simply wash their hands properly. He was just 47 years old. So if you've gotten this far without your doctor giving you a life-threatening infection from the dead guy in the other room, then one of the people you should be thanking is a madman from Hungary who died young, whose funeral was attended by only a handful of people, was widely despised, very unpopular, and thought to be ill-tempered, tactless, intolerant, and superlatively offensive. If I had to sum up Semmelweis's sorry existence in one word, it would be loser. Thing is, the loser was right. And the establishment, the experts, the medical scientific consensus, they were all wrong.
Sound familiar? Yes, I know I was a lot skinnier back then. Thank you very much for noticing. Back then, I was speaking out against Julia Gillard's proposed News Media Council, basically a ministry of truth. We were successful at stopping that from happening. And to the dinosaur media, who either failed to report the story or actually liked the idea of the News Media Council, I say, you're welcome, you idiots. But since that time, governments around the world have realised they don't need legislation or bureaucracy to carry out their will when tech companies are more than happy to do it on their behalf, no legislation required. And so it is against this backdrop of rapid technological change and technology that we discover that humans really haven't changed at all. The very same censorious instincts that led to the executions of philosophers and thinkers in ancient Greece and the casting of Christians to the lions in ancient Rome still exist today. They take a very different expression, thankfully far less violent for now, but the desire to use power to silence your opponents is as real and strong a human instinct today as it has ever been. Remember the wailing that happened when Musk took over Twitter? He was going to allow hate speech, by which they meant speech that they hate, because they disagree with it. But have you noticed that since the Musk takeover of Twitter, there's been less of the censorship on all platforms? I've certainly noticed that. But even though Twitter might these days be more free than it once was, the same can't be said for the likes of Fox News in the US. Barely a week after letting go of Dan Bongino, one of their best and most outspoken hosts, they then fired Tucker Carlson, just days after he dared to call out the media at large and his own network as well for spreading misinformation. The sin that really got him fired appears to be that he challenged their dependence on big pharmaceutical companies as a source of advertising revenue, and questioned just how independent the network could possibly be when they were completely beholden to the very companies they were reporting on. He was right, of course. Fox are a part of a large and complex media empire, although Fox themselves are not receiving large sums from pharmaceutical companies. The portfolio of companies owned by the same people that own Fox most certainly do. It's no surprise that there are reports that we can neither confirm nor deny that the cancelling of Tucker's show was directly ordered from the top. It certainly makes sense that that order would have to come from the very top, given that the decision wiped hundreds of millions of dollars off their share values and would make the board liable for lawsuits from shareholders for that unnecessary loss of value. So it does make sense that such an order would have to have come from those shareholders, the owners, the very top. But we can't confirm or deny. Fox News has fallen prey to the very same predators that have captured, well, all of the mainstream media. Every challenge you can think of is dependent either on the government or on a handful of wealthy companies for their financial survival. And in that context, independence is a myth. Here at the Aussie Wire, we are independent because we don't depend on them. It's another way of saying, well, we need you. Remember, if you're not the one paying, then you're not the customer. You're the product. And places like Sky, Fox, the ABC, and all the mainstream media, you are their product, not their customer. They attract your eyeballs and they sell them to the highest bidder, like the government wanting to tell you what to think and large companies that want to tell you how to live. The last thing either the government or big business want to tell you is how you can be free. This is the new battleground in the war of ideas, the big money, big networks that are mouthpieces for government and businesses that don't want you to be free, versus the truly independent alternative media that do want you to be free. At the Aussie Wire, we're just the latest reinforcements on the side of freedom in a battle that has waged since long before I was born and will keep going long after I'm dead. The battle to be free. Free to speak, free to think, free to believe, free to act as long as our actions aren't taking away the freedom of others. That's the side that I'm on, and I hope you are too. Be sure to follow at the Aussie Wire on all our social channels and help keep us free and independent by becoming an insider at the aussiewire.locals.com/support. There is a link in the video description. Now, let's get to the news. Well, we hear a lot about things like the World Health Organization, World Economic Forum, the UN and various bodies, but what a lot of people don't fully understand is just how they all interact with each other and how they actually interact with a place like Australia. I mean, we don't vote for them, so who are they? Where do they come from? Who decides who gets to be there and who doesn't? How do they get funded? And why do we have a sitting senator in the form of Senator Alex Antic from South Australia who's actively pushing and arguing in Parliament for us to actually exit the WHO? That's not something you'll hear from a lot of politicians, but we're hearing it from Alex Antic and a handful of others, and we talk to him now. Senator Alex Antic, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Topher, and congratulations on the new show. It's looking great.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I've just got some footage here of your speech that you gave to the Senate, and you're really not mucking around here. You're saying in no uncertain terms, we have no reason to be in the WHO. The WHO has no right to be meddling in our affairs. Correct me if I'm paraphrasing you incorrectly. That's a pretty strong stance to take and runs against the zeitgeist. So can you bring us up to speed? Where do organisations like the WHO get their power from, and why is it that you don't think they should have it?
Yeah, well, I think it's there's a 2-hour history lesson there on the background to the WHO and the UN and the World Health Assembly, and so you can be here for a long period of time. But in essence, they're global bodies running in conjunction with the United Nations that really have a lot of sway on the healthcare decisions of sovereign nations. And in Australia's terms, what we're seeing is a slow erosion, I think, of sovereign healthcare decision making being almost outsourced. Now that is a bit sort of simplistic in its terms, but But really, what we're doing by signing up to the international health regulations, which we're already a signatory to and are already imposed, and other pandemic treaties, is effectively outsourcing a lot of the decision-making to global elite health bureaucrats. Now, they don't know what's right for Australia. Australian doctors know what's right for Australia.
Let me stop you there, because the argument that gets made is these people are in that position because they're the best in the world. That's the argument, that anyone who's an Australian healthcare professional is going to know less than someone who's a world healthcare professional. And of course, they're all going to know more than your local GP possibly would. That's the argument in favour of having these sorts of global bodies, that somehow they're better informed, have more information, have more expertise. What's your counter to that argument?
Well, look, I've no doubt there are some very capable people involved. I mean, they're very smart people, very capable people. But what you tend to find with bureaucracies is that, it's like the old adage, those who can't teach, and that's probably a pretty clumsy sort of way. But it's a little bit the same when it comes to bureaucracies. What you find is often the best clinical performers are in private practice or in public hospitals and so on and so forth. And, some of those that just like the administrative side of medicine or whatever it is go into the bureaucracy. And I think we find that with the World Health Organization as well. There's nothing that substitutes for on-the-ground knowledge. And we saw that through the COVID period with the response of the WHO. I mean, they almost didn't get anything right. Let's be quite honest. And the connections to bodies like the CCP and the Chinese Communist Party are a real worry for this country, because ultimately, even when the pandemic treaty or the international health regulations are not directly indicative of the laws that we're passing, but they can be used as a pretext for passing laws. So quite often the external affairs power will be used as a mechanism for, say something like the Biosecurity Act or whatever a new version of that may be. And so what this does is it provides the framework for almost top-down control of the Australian healthcare system. I don't think anyone can justify the World Health Organization being an influential factor in the Australian healthcare system after what we saw during COVID.
Certainly no argument from me there. I think they were worse than useless in terms of their accuracy during COVID, and that's really playing out now and becoming quite undeniable. But I do have one further question. How is it that they then have influence in Australia? What's the mechanism? There's somebody that we didn't elect. They're over there on the other side of the world. What's the mechanism by which they actually have any influence at all?
Well, I mean, we send delegates. So we send, I think in this case, the Chief Health Officer, the Commonwealth Chief Health Officer there to act as Australia's delegate. And, ultimately that person, I presume, is an envoy from the Health Department and the Health Minister here in Australia. So we have voting rights like all the other member nations do, and we have a say in whether or not amendments to the international health regulations get passed, whether or not we become a signatory to a new treaty, the pandemic treaty as it's being called. People should have a look around and find some information about that. What that document is proposing to do is basically outsource our healthcare to a global bureaucracy that doesn't have any real eyes on Australia on the ground. This is really worrying stuff, Topher, and I that's why I say this is past its use-by date. We should get out.
Look, you won't hear me arguing, except for the purposes of pushing back to get your thoughts and make sure we have a deep enough conversation about these issues. But this, as you said at the start, this is a huge issue. We're going to have to touch on this more, and I'm sure there's a lot more to play out. So, Senator Alex Antic, thank you so much for coming on, and I look forward to having you again in the future on the Aussie Wire.
Thanks, Topher. Good on you.
Aussie Wire insiders get exclusive access to content, special discounts on upcoming event, access to our tips line, and a community of like-minded people. And also, merch giveaways. We're drawing the winner of a $150 merch giveaway pretty much right now. If you're watching this and you're not already an insider, then you're too late for this particular giveaway. If you are an insider, then you were automatically in the running. You didn't have to do anything in order to be in the running. The winner will be announced at 4:30 p.m. on Thursday, the 4th of May, on our social pages and, of course, in our insiders community, which is hosted on Locals. So if you want to be in the running for future merch giveaways and want to be a part of our insiders and enjoy all of those benefits, then head over to the aussiewire.locals.com/support and join today. The link is in the description. Well, the New South Wales elections recently happened and were a very successful election for a lot of the minor parties that have been campaigning for a long time, of course, with lots of ups and downs. Well, it was certainly an up for the Liberal Democratic Party and for John Ruddick, a long-time friend of mine, long-time campaigner, who went from being John Ruddick to being the Honourable John Ruddick MLC. John, welcome to the Aussie Wire.
Terrific to see you, Topher. Thanks very much for having you, and I'm honoured to be here on the Aussie Wire.
Well, look, it's a rough game being in politics. You have to do an awful lot of work for free out on the hustings, and no one pays you, and there's no guarantee of any sort of success. How does it feel? Tell me about the journey. Tell me about the Liberal Democrats and the support that you receive from there and from so many of the members and so forth, and how it feels now to have actually finally achieved that goal.
Well, look, as you know, Topher, I was in and around the New South Wales Liberal Party for 2 or 3 decades, and I thought my contribution to public life would be bringing about historic democratic reforms to the Liberal Party. Because I thought that was the best vehicle to have good government in this country. Now, I'd always secretly voted for the Liberal Democrats in the last 10, 15 years. I joined the Liberal Democrats just as we were going into an extended lockdown in mid-2021. And that's when I said to myself, I said, look, the Liberal Party have got no hope. They cannot be forgiven for 3 things: the authoritarian COVID state, the massive debt, $1 trillion, thanks ScoMo and Josh, when John Howard left the country with no Commonwealth debt, and the capitulation on global warming, which I think is junk science. And I thought, look, 3 strikes and you're out. So I rang up the Liberal Democrats and I said, look, I want to get involved. I want to join, and I'd like to be your candidate in Warringah. And I thought, obviously I wasn't going to win Warringah, but I thought I could sort of, bring some publicity to this little party, which had so much promise. And here we are.
Yeah, brilliant. So you've stepped into the role. You're obviously trying to sort out your private life. A lot of people don't understand what has to go on behind the scenes. It's not like the rest of your life stops the moment you become an MP, and you're in the middle of that process right now. But the other thing that you have to do, as someone who has now succeeded at sort of reaching the starting line, as it were, is now decide what is it that you're actually wanting to push for, and what is it that you're actually hoping to achieve by having now gotten in. Do you have a clear agenda of the things that you'd like to be working towards?
Well, the Liberal Democrats are a libertarian party, so we believe in cutting taxes, cutting spending, cutting regulation, and cutting debt, all the good things. So whenever a piece of legislation comes my way, that's of course I'll be thinking, what can we do to reduce the size of the state and increase the strength and the vitality of the citizens. Okay, now, but in terms of specifics, look, I'm not moving on from COVID. I do not want to sweep it under the carpet like a lot of people do. I am concerned about these vax injuries. There's been a big increase in overall deaths in this country and other countries that went, hysterically reacted to the COVID situation. Now, I don't know whether those deaths are the result of the vaccine or a hangover from the lockdown. Either way, it was caused by the government, and I want to get to the bottom of that.
Now, it's good to know that there are people that aren't letting that go and are working towards some sort of justice, whatever that might have to look like in the end. There is another topic that you've brought up recently that really caught my attention. I do want to bring that up in this interview because this is a topic that I was dead wrong on when it all unfolded in 2010, 2011. We saw the WikiLeaks leaking of these very sensitive US national security documents. We saw Julian Assange become the most hunted man in the world. And I'll put my hand up and say, at the time, I was completely wrong because I was supporting the idea that he needed to be thrown away, throw away the key and just forget that he was ever born. And I regret to say that was definitely my position on him at the time. I thought I bought the mainstream media lie about him. I guess that's the way to sum it up. I've changed radically since then, and what you said about Julian Assange recently and Australia's role in potentially putting more pressure on to aid him caught my attention. So what is it that you've been saying and advocating for with regard to Julian Assange?
Joe Biden is going to be in Sydney on the 24th of May. He's going to be at the Opera House, which is about 3 blocks down from Parliament House. The Australian taxpayers have just, we've got this $1 trillion debt. Albo has just got us clocked up on another $363 billion on the national credit card to buy these American subs. Now we're told it's about defence, but those subs are attack defence. But anyway, let's put that aside about whether AUKUS is right or wrong. Surely Anthony Albanese from the left of the Labor Party could have said to Joe Biden, look, here's $363 billion. Thanks very much. Thanks for the subs. But we would like Australian citizen Julian Assange returned. Now, there is a parallel here, Topher. You would remember the David Hicks saga.
Yes, I do.
Now, no one is disputing, including Hicks himself, that he was at least, associated with Al-Qaeda. Okay, and he ended up in Guantanamo Bay, and there was such a huge public relations campaign here in Australia from the left that John Howard, when he's facing a tough election in 2007 and the lead up to that, John Howard rang up his mate Dick Cheney, said, "Look, Mr. Cheney, Mr. Vice President, you got to do me a favour here. This David Hicks thing is a big deal. You got to help me. And Cheney says, Mr. Vice President, yep, I'll organise his release as a favour to you.
Yeah.
Now, Hicks was baddie, but he was an Australian citizen, and people, there was enough public outcry that he was released. Now, Assange, in my view, is a goodie. Okay, and Topher, if you go to the Julian Assange Wikipedia page, down the bottom of it, they've got this subcategory of all the awards that he's ever won.
Yeah.
He won about 40 journalistic awards for integrity and for great disclosure. Sydney Morning Herald, the ABC, all around the world, they all loved him. But it all stopped in 2016 when he got blamed he did release Hillary Clinton's and the DNC's emails, and we saw the unbelievable geopolitical corruption that they were involved in, and then the left just dropped him. Okay, now, but there are, there's left wingers and right wingers now that support Julian Assange, and I'm hoping a lot of people can join us at the Opera House on the 24th of May.
Well, look, I wish you Godspeed, and I certainly hope that we can see some justice with him. I've come full circle on Julian Assange. I thought he was the baddie to start with. Now I've realised that actually he was the one trying to do the rest of us a favour, and I certainly think that he should be a free man. Anything that we can do to help to make that happen, I think, is a wonderful thing. John, before I let you go, congratulations again. I look forward to seeing you standing up for your principles and standing up for your constituents, and I look forward to seeing what you can achieve in the New South Wales Parliament. Thank you so much for your time.
Terrific. Thank you, Topher.
That was John Ruddick, newly elected for the Liberal Democrats to the New South Wales Upper House. Everyone knows by now that smoking is very, very bad for you. Even me, as an occasional cigar smoker, I know that smoking cigarettes every day of my life is probably going to kill me. That's not exactly something that needs a big awareness campaign. But the federal government has been waging war on tobacco in the form of taxes. We now pay over $1,700 per kilogram of tax, and the newly minted Labor government at a federal level have just announced that that's going to start going up 5% every 6 months. So $1,700 per kilo isn't enough. It's going to go up even more. But of course they say it's in the pursuit of public health. And yet at the same time they're waging war on one of the greatest stop smoking aids ever invented, certainly the greatest in the last 20 years, in the form of vaping. Now this is an issue I've touched on from time to time over the last 10 years of my time as a political commentator, but I wanted to get an expert on. So we have today Brian Marlow from Legalise Vaping Australia. Brian, how are you?
I'm well, thanks for having me.
Look, thank you for coming on. This is something, you and I have worked together a little bit on this before, because this is something that I do genuinely care about. It really, really bothers me when the government throws resources and energy into fixing something that is a free market solution to the problem already. The solution is already there. They're literally fighting the solution. We went to a new level of madness yesterday when we saw the Health Minister, Mark Butler, literally come out and say that they are raising tobacco taxes to stop the scourge of vaping. I can't make sense of what that sentence means. Can you?
I don't think anyone can. I don't even think Mark Butler can. I think even he knows that this is just a ludicrous plan. Tobacco taxes in Australia are the highest in the world. The average smoker... Now the argument... Before I get stuck into that, the argument for taxing tobacco in Australia is they say, well, we have public health care, smokers get all kinds of debilitating illnesses, that costs the public purse, so we should tax them. And if we tax them, it will encourage them to quit smoking. Well, first of all, taxing them didn't encourage them to quit smoking because they're addicted, so we're just taxing people's addictions. And second of all, smokers pay far in excess into the public purse than they'll ever take out of the public purse through healthcare. I think it's over 10 times that they pay.
I've heard it reported. I've heard it reported as high as 13 times. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but just for anyone that's not familiar with the subject, when you see someone smoking, you're looking at someone who is paying into the healthcare system, let's say at least 10 times what they are going to cost, assuming that they actually, or if they have the statistical rate of getting cancer. So it's quite absurd to say that we need to recover cost from smokers. That horse is bolted. We're already there well and truly. So now it's about stopping people. And this is where it gets really absurd in relation to vaping.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the same breath that he's saying that he's going to jack up taxes on tobacco even higher, and we're already the highest in the world, he's also saying that he's not only going to ban the importation of sort of some of those dodgy disposable vapes that we see sold under the table, and kids are accessing. He's also saying we're going to ban all vaping products that are used recreationally entirely. Now, These are products that are accessed by adults. They've used them to quit smoking. Many of the products sold in Australia by specialist vape shops don't even contain nicotine because vapers will get their nicotine either from a pharmacy or from overseas, and they'll mix themselves. And Mark Butler's saying, no, get rid of all of that. He's fine with it being sold through a pharmaceutical model. So pharmaceutical companies will make squillions. That's totally fine. But if you're, a middle-class Australian that opened a family-run vape shop that helps adult smokers quit, no, you've got to go. We're going to shut you down. There'll be no appeals process. There'll be nothing. You just run a legal business now because Mark Butler doesn't like it, and you've got to go. And to cap it off, if those vapers who no longer can access those products go back to smoking, they're going to have to pay even more. Now, when you go into the demographics of what the average smoker looks like, they're working class people. They're people living below certain income brackets. A lot of them are minimum wage earners. Indigenous communities, it's almost 50% of Indigenous Australians smoke. They're the ones that are going to be paying through the nose through excessive taxes. So Labor's sitting here saying that they want to have an Indigenous voice while being happy to tax an Indigenous person's addiction and get them to a point where they quite literally, because of how expensive cigarettes are, I've had multiple smokers tell me that there are times at the worst of their addiction where they'll choose to buy cigarettes instead of having a meal to eat.
So this is the thing that blows.
And
the thing that blows my mind is I personally know numerous heavily addicted chain smokers who failed at quitting every other time they tried. The patches didn't work, the gum didn't work. Some of them tried hypnosis and all sorts of different things in an effort to try and quit smoking. Then vaping came along. And when they got nicotine into a vape, because it met not only the nicotine addiction, but also the habit and the social side of it, going outside of the office for 5 minutes, standing around with the other smokers, freezing in the winter rain, it met all of the various aspects of addiction, not just the nicotine addiction. They were all of a sudden able to switch to vaping, and some of them cold turkey, not all of them, but some of them absolutely cold turkey, from one to the other, literally overnight. That's an extraordinary invention, and it's literally saving lives. But some people believe the propaganda that vaping is worse than smoking, that it's a terrible thing and a horrible thing and popcorn lung and all this sort of stuff. We should probably take a moment to go back to the basics and cover a little bit about why are people like you and me so in favour of adults being allowed to vape and to have nicotine in vapes as a stop smoking aid. Why is that something that you and I are excited about?
Yeah, sorry, the neighbour's dog has decided to arc up. I guess the dog also cares about vaping. Look, I think there's a couple of things to unpack here. So, yeah, a lot of Australians have been propagandised and believe that vaping is worse than smoking. Now, that's a failure on the part of our state and federal health departments. They've basically lied to the public and the media. They've lied to the public to make them think that. The overwhelming evidence is that vaping is at least 95% less harmful. Now, this isn't some random figure that came out of nowhere. The UK Health Department conducted this review into vaping many years ago, and they found it was at least 95% less harmful than smoking cigarettes. They, on a yearly basis, go over that same report and they review it and they update their priors, and they still keep coming back to that same figure. Other countries have gone through the exact same amount of data and they come through to that figure. But in Australia, it took our organisation over 3 years just to get the former health minister to admit that vaping was less harmful. But he wouldn't agree with 95%. He said, oh, well, maybe it's less harmful. Okay, fine. And maybe it helps people quit smoking. Okay, fine. So they've misled the public. The average person thinks that vaping's more harmful than cigarettes. Now, cigarettes kill 52 Australians every single day. Vaping doesn't. And we're staring down the barrel of now banning adult access to less harmful products. Some of those people will go back to smoking and jacking up the taxes on them. The taxes in this country are so high on cigarettes that currently 1 in 5 cigarettes that are sold in Australia are now black market cigarettes. So they're imported from other countries by crime syndicates. People are buying those because they can buy those for less money. But those rates are increasing. The last report I saw showed that it's going to potentially hit 1 in 4 cigarettes sold. Well, if they're going to jack the price up 5% every single 6 months, it's going to that rate of illicit tobacco is going to get even higher. So the only people that are going to benefit Chinese crime syndicates that ship these products in from China by the container load, whilst local businesses go under, and whilst eventually the government will actually miss out on revenue. I don't even think they've thought this through. They don't realize that at a certain point, more people will be buying illicit tobacco than buying legal tobacco, and their revenue will go down. And we've seen this. In Malaysia, it's over 60%. Again, because they started taxing tobacco too much.
Well, that's the old Laffer curve at work. People change their behaviour in response to incentives, and increasing the taxes on something like cigarettes is only going to create an incentive for the illegal import and an incentive for consumers to buy those illegal products. This makes no sense. Even the announcement, even Mark Butler standing up there and grandstanding and saying, hey, we're going to increase tobacco taxes in order to reduce vaping rates, just that sentence itself doesn't even make sense. It's one of the most spectacular pieces of nonsense I've seen come out of a government, and I say that as a guy who lived through the madness in Melbourne during COVID. It's just quite incredible to see it. Brian, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and we do look forward to talking to you again and hearing how things progress with the Legalise Vaping campaign. That's all for today in the Aussie Wire News. Thank you so much for watching. Do check out the video description for links to our Insiders page, links for our guests, and if you missed the previous episode of the Aussie Wire News, be sure to click the link to watch so that you're up to date with all of what we've been covering here at the Aussie Wire News. At the Aussie Wire News, we stand for truth, freedom, and hope. And I trust that just by us being here, we've given you a little boost of hope today. Hang in there. The pushback has begun. I'm Topher Field, and this is the Aussie Wire.